Hello everyone, my name is Kumu Matambo and I'll be taking you guys through task A for this APC workshop. All right, without wasting too much time, let me get straight into it. In addition to your pre-released information that were in the background information, the slides that you were given about the company, you were given document number 4, which dealt with the email from the Chief Financial Officer to the Financial Manager. So what I've done here is that I've just taken the relevant extracts from document number 4 from that particular email, and I've highlighted quite a few of the things that I thought were triggers, things that you could have thought about as you read the pre-released information. Now, you were told that there was a loan balance between, I like to call it ARC Egos and Midrand School. You were told that for a school to reach a solid financial position only after about 5 to 6 years is something that is normal. So you then have to go back to when this Midrand School was established, and you'd see that in the background information it was around about 2014. So now you've passed the 6 years and somebody's still telling you that, well, it is still usual. Now, ARC Egos schools lent some money to Midrand School. So here you would have seen that there is something that is developing here. You've got a parent subsidiary relationship, ARC Egos being the parent here, an amount of 10 million rand, okay, for it to be able to meet its obligations. So we're also given that, and you're given further information. There has been a delay in reaching profitability. Now you are now starting to think about your going concern indicators. Okay, so these guys are not being profitable, and then the pandemic has come through and added some more headaches. We are told about the net liability position of the Midrand School, which was started in 2014, and we were told about the slight deterioration in that particular aspect. And then you were given other factors such as the parents have opted for less costly competitors or options. The school has lost a number of learners. So if you were to think about going concern, you're looking at going concern indicators, but we'll talk more a little bit about it in the next couple of slides. And then at the end, I want you to remember this word or this phrase. At the end, we're told that, but it is doable, right? What does that mean? We're having difficulties, but it is doable. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next few slides. Then we were told about an intercompany loan balance, right? If you're not as strong in your group statements, you'd be thinking, oh no, here comes the intergroup balances, the intercompany transactions, eliminations, etc. Right? We were also told about the financial position, being given grief about the financial position. We were told about insolvency and financial distress issues in terms of the Companies Act. We were told about this not being an issue. So what would this mean? And we'll find out in the next couple of slides as well. Now, in the last part of the email, right, you're then told about the Midrand School, which is a standalone entity, because you've been given that this is actually a separate entity, right? It's a PTY Limited, which then filters into ARC Egos. So you've got a parent and a subsidiary. A subsidiary, which is a separate entity, its own legal entity, right? Which is operating on its own. So you would have separate financial statements and you would have consolidated financial statements. Then we were told that ARC Egos is willing to support Midrand School, right? Now the question is, what does this mean? And we are told that this is in relation to fixing solvency issues. We're told that the board is considering whether they should do a letter of support, a guarantee, a subordination agreement, and which one would be most appropriate in any case. Okay, so that then becomes important because you're keeping that at the back of the mind. And what I've highlighted in gray, we need to be prepared to respond to any questions the council may have, as we will still accountable to them at the company level. So that is very, 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 very important because it shapes the kind of tasks that you're going to anticipate. Okay, so let's break down the triggers. So let's talk about the loan balance between ARC Egos and Midrand School. let's talk about the intercompany loan itself. When they say that it will be eliminated in any case, and also when they say, however, this clearly isn't an issue at group level. So what this means is that you are required to understand that the two levels, the consolidated set of Fs, where you've got the consolidated set of Archegos Fs, and then you've got separate financial statements. So you've got Archego and you've got Midrand School, because they're two separate entities, right? One is a parent, one is a subsidiary. And because of that, what is it that is sitting on the balance sheet from one side to the other in the separate financial statements? Because what they're saying here is at the group level, it's gone, right? But in the separate financial statements, that's what we want to talk about. So what does this mean in the context of audit? Do you think about your related parties? And related parties, you need to start thinking about the whole sphere, because you need to think about related parties in terms of IAS 24 in accounting. You need to think about ISA 550 related parties, right? And to a certain extent, how that then links to ISA 240, your fraud risks when it comes to related parties. You need to think about Section 2 of the Companies Act, because it also defines related entities. Then in the context of this intercompany loan, what would be the implications in terms of Section 45 of the Companies Act when it comes to financial assistance to related entities? Then, of course, in terms of Section 29, when you present your financial statements, are they prepared in accordance with the applicable financial reporting framework? And once you've done detailed research on this, you then need to take a step back and say, okay, what could I possibly be asked here? Could they ask me about assessing the legality of the intercompany loan, i.e. the provisions of Section 45 of the Companies Act? And I'll tell you in the next slide or so how Section 45 also filters to your solvency and liquidity, etc. Could they ask you about audit plan regarding your related parties? What is your plan? How are you going to respond to the risk of material misstatement in relation to your disclosures of related parties, for example, and the associated audit risks? So that would be something that would be key for you to think about as you do your research. Now, for that bit of triggers that I spoke about a little bit earlier on, and I titled them indicators of going concern risks. So we were told about there has been a delay in reaching profitability due to the impact of the pandemic. We were told about the anticipation that these issues will be resolved in the next few years once normalized, or once things normalize, or once it is normalized. But in that context, if you think about a few years coming, what does going concern mean to you, right? Going concern, you need to know that the entity will be able to operate in the foreseeable future. Foreseeable future, usually your 12 months, right? So if somebody is telling you that it's not resolved now, it will be in the future, what does that tell you? Do you have a material uncertainty related to going concern? Do you have a going concern issue? Is the going concern assumption appropriate, right? And then they go on to give you more indicators. School also lost a number of learners. If you lose customers, what happens, right? Your business is struggling. Parents opting for alternatives, right? That means they are competitors to which the parents are taking their kids to. What does that mean for your business? What does that do for your ability to continue with your business operations? And then you then see the other indicators, some ground that needs to be made up in terms of the usual growth curve. So the growth curve is not as normal. So what then that triggers is also, you might think about your ratio analysis that are relevant to going concern, right? In terms of obtaining understanding, you need to understand going concern indicators, the risks that come with going concern. You need to do a detailed research of ISA 570. What are the contents of ISA 570? Because that could determine whether you are asked to evaluate the appropriateness of the going concern assumption, whether you're asked to draft responses to the risk of material misstatement in relation to going concern, whether you are asked to discuss the necessary disclosures that are required regarding going concern. After seeing these indicators, that's a possible task. Right, and staying with the idea of liquidity and solvency, right, there were a few other indicators. We're told about or triggers. We're told about the net liability position in the mid-range school balance sheet, right? And we also told that it is slightly worse than the prior year, so things are worsening. Okay, so they are in a net liability position. What does that mean? It means the assets are less than the liabilities, or the liabilities are more than the assets. Okay, now if you take a minute to think about it, what does this mean, right? It means that there could be issues of liquidity and solvency. But again, you're given a trigger that somebody says, surely that fixes whatever insolvency issues, right? You were given some context to it. You were told that there's a letter of support, or think about a letter of support, a guarantee, or a subordination agreement to try and fix that insolvency issue. We were told about insolvency and financial distress issues in terms of the Companies Act. So automatically, you then know that I need to think about going concern indicators. I need to think about legal implications of trading whilst insolvent, right? And the material that comes with that. You want to think about your ISA 570. Of course, we've discussed ISA 570 before. I'm not going to go into detail when it comes to this slide. But surely Section 4 of the Companies Act, which defines solvency and liquidity, the considerations in determining whether an entity is solvent and liquid, you need to do further research because you need to see, do we have commercial solvency or do we have factual insolvency? Is this about net assets versus net current assets versus net current liabilities, or is this about your total assets versus your total liabilities, right? And in this case, we are being told about assets less than liabilities, right? Then you would want to say, okay, could this point out to reckless trading? If I think about Section 22, could somebody see Midrand as trading recklessly, i.e. with gross negligence, or with the intent to defraud somebody? Should I be considering Section 129 in relation to financial distress, and what are the aspects of financial distress that I need to understand? And with that in mind, what would you expect the directors of Midrand to do? What would be the standard of their conduct, right? In terms of the best interest of the entity, in terms of good faith, due diligence, skill, care, etc. Then you would say, okay, because of my considerations and this is happening, these guys are still trading, is there a chance that there's a reportable irregularity as defined in the Auditing Profession Act in Section 1? And what would be the process in terms of Section 45 of the APA in order to deal with reportable irregularities? Then, of course, some of you might never have seen the word or the phrase letter of support, a guarantee, or subordination agreement. You would then need to go further and investigate to see, okay, what is it? What is a letter of support? What are the contents of a letter of support? What does the letter of support help with? What is a guarantee? Who gives a guarantee? What are the contents of a guarantee? What does it help with? What is a subordination agreement? What does it mean to have a subordination agreement? And where is it applicable? And what does it help with? That is very, very, very important. Okay? In terms of your anticipated tasks, you would then anticipate that you might be asked to assess whether there is a reportable irregularity. You might be asked to discuss the factors to be considered in drafting the audit opinion or the audit report, right? You need to discuss, or maybe you might be asked to assess whether the Midrand school is actually a going concern or not, right? And then you take a step back and say, what else could be asked, right? The disclosures in terms of ISA 570 and the impact if something is not disclosed. Or it could be additional audit procedures in terms of going concern, right? Very important. Somebody can come back and give you cash flows and say, well, evaluate whether if they're actually a going concern or not. You're thinking about your ratios that you can calculate based on the information that you would be given or you would have had. Right. With that in mind, we'll chat when we talk about information on the day. Thank you. Chat to you soon.